This is a map for Half-Life 2's map editor called Hammer. This map is called Metro Attack, and the name of this map comes from the fact that two squads of Metro Police, in total 8 Metro Police, will spawn down here and will run up the ramp and will attack the enemy up here. The enemy is two groups of citizens and soldiers, which have their squads mixed, but this map relies on AI relationships most importantly, and AI or enemy finders second most importantly. The relationships are called global relationships. What that means is that using the 8 keys star, I can tell Hammer to apply it to every entity named something. And the example for this would be a cop down here. It says cop and then star. What Hammer does is that when it reads this, it sees the star, and in anything before the star, it will apply to. Anything after the star, it will ignore. The way that that works is that it sees cop. So if we come down here, we'll notice that these guys are named cop, cop underscore 0, for example. What Hammer will read instead of this underscore and 0, it will read just cop. And since there's multiple entities on the map named cop, it will apply it to all of those. Same thing for the soldiers and the citizens. What Hammer does is that that star very specifically tells Hammer anything before the star is what you're supposed to apply it to. Anything after the star is to be ignored. Using that, it makes AI relationships way simpler. It basically means that anything with that name can be applied to. Anything after that name will just be ignored, like I said. And what that does is it makes it much simpler because now you don't have to make 5,000 AI relationships for each individual NPC and its target. You can just go in and specify cop star, and it'll apply to all cops. Citizen star, it'll apply to all citizens. Soldier star, and then it will apply to all soldiers. To run down the relationships, this is cop global 0, which tells the cops to ignore the player. Cop global 1, which tells the cops to hate the soldiers. This is reciprocal, so that way the soldiers also hate the cops. Soldier global 0, which tells the soldiers to ignore the player. Global 0, which is the soldiers liking the citizens, and that is also reciprocal, so that way the citizens also like the soldiers. Global 1, which is the citizens ignoring the player. Aside from that, there is a logic auto, which tells the cop makers to spawn after 5 seconds. It triggers a patrol relay right here, which triggers 2 more relays. These relays use the exact same method as the relationships, citizen star, and what that does is that it will look for anything with the name sit in it, and it will tell it to start patrolling. Same thing over here for the soldiers. Over here we can see the enemy finders. What that does is it has its own relationships right here, but these enemy finders are also inside of the cop squads, cop 0 and cop 1 respectively. What this does is that because it's a part of the cop squad, it will act as a member of the squad spotting enemies, but it will not actually act like an enemy or an NPC. It just looks for enemies and tells the cops where they are. What it does is it has a field of view of -1, meaning it looks everywhere, a max search distance of 5,000, which means that it looks at the entire map. And it starts on, and if we go to flags here, we can see most importantly it does not check for visibility, which means it will look through everything, including the map itself. In other words, it will always find enemies. There's no way to hide from it. It will always find them. And same thing for this one over here. The relationships for this one are also globals. In other words, the example here is that cop, enemy finder, and then star. So what this does is it looks for anything with the name cop, enemy finder. Since there's 2 here, it will apply to both of them. And it tells the enemy finders that it hates citizens. In other words, it will report the citizens' locations, and same thing for the soldiers. These are very, very important along with their relationships, because without them, when the Metro Police spawn down here, they will just stand there and they will do nothing. With them, the Metro Police will always be told where the enemy is and they'll go looking for them. And the Metro Police spawn around a more complex squad spawning system, also featured in the Citizen Attack map I have. But what this does is it has 3 entities, 4 if you count the wave counter, an env entity maker, a math counter, and a point template. The maker uses a point template, this thing right here. The point template tells it what to spawn. The math counter tells it how much to spawn. Actually, no, it does not tell it how much to spawn. It tells it when to respawn. Excuse me. And this entity maker effectively works like this. When it's told to spawn, it will subtract 4 from the counter. This starts at 0, so at first this does nothing. But when these guys die, it tells the cop counter to add 1. And once this gets to 4, it will respawn the entire squad by telling the maker to force spawn. When this, like I said, when this spawns, it will tell the counter then to subtract 4, so this goes back down to 0. And then also, it adds 1 when it spawns. It adds 1 to the wave counter, so when this gets to 5, it will kill the entity maker, and that does it for both squads. That squad spawning system will only respawn the entire squad once the entire squad has been eliminated. It will not respawn them individually. The reason why I have this instead of a NPC template maker is because the template maker would continually spawn a single NPC, and I would have to have either 2 spawners for that, or I would have to have like 8 spawners, and that's just way too much work. This effectively means that I can spawn an entire squad at once without having to worry about individual NPCs. There is also a game ragdoll manager, which tells the game instead of 8 ragdolls, there can be 26 ragdolls, so it will stop fading ragdolls until it reaches 26, which should be a little bit more than what the game will allow to be spawned. But anyway, the way that this map works, aside from the logic, is that the logic auto will tell these 2 entity makers to spawn. What happens after that, very simply, is that the Metro Police will start spawning, they will die, they will respawn, and eventually they will either be wiped out or they will wipe out their enemies up here. And that's about it.